Dear Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Slovenia, dear Vice President of the National Assembly of the Republic of Slovenia, Your Excellencies, dear member of the European Parliament, respected members of the Council and IFIMES Institute, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zijad Bečirović and I am Director of the International Institute for Middle East and Balkan Studies from Ljubljana. Allow me to greet you and thank you for coming in such a large number to today's lecture and discussion with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Slovenia, Mr. Samuel Žbogar. His lecture is entitled Slovenian Foreign Policy and its Role in the Western Balkans. The lecture will be followed by a discussion which will be moderated with Mr. Bakhtiar Aliev. Simultaneous interpretation is provided, and after the discussion you are invited to attend the refreshment. Before I pass the floor to our guests, allow me to make a short introduction. At the end of 2009, IFIMES bodies adopted a few decisions. One decision was to establish the position of Honorary President of the IFIMES Institute. The title of Honorary President was awarded to President of the Republic of Croatia, Mr. Stjepan Mesić, who was very pleased to receive the title. Recently, the IFIMES delegation visited his office in Zagreb and presented Mr. Mesić with the title. Honorary President will probably deliver a lecture at the Institute in March this year. The IFIMES Institute also adopted the decision to grant a special award called Personality of the Year 2009. The award was presented to the wife of Qatar Emir Her Highness Mauza bin Nasser Al Misnad and the Qatar Foundation. Her Highness Sheikha Musa bin Nasser Al Misnad and the Qatar Foundation undertook great efforts in 2009. And they made an influential development in the cultural, educational and humanitarian activities in Qatar and the Middle East region. She is one of the most influential women in the Middle East. It is therefore in view of the emancipation of women, human rights, modernization and democratization of society that IFIMES unanimously adopted the decision to grant the award Personality of the Year 2009 to Her Highness Sheikha Mauza bin Nasser Al Misnad and her organization Qatar Foundation. Her Highness has been informed of the special award which will be presented to her during the visit of the IFIMES delegation in Qatar, which will be probably in March this year. Since the IFIMES Institute has its head office in Slovenia, and because foreign policy is one of our main fields of research, we have adopted the decision to select the positive personality of the year in the field of foreign policy. Although there are many individuals in Slovenia who are active in this field of foreign policy, we have decided to grant the award to His Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Slovenia, Mr. Samuel Žbogar. This is the reason we have invited our guest to deliver a lecture and to continue to disseminate this positivism today and also in the future. Dear Mr. President, allow me to congratulate you on this award on behalf of my colleagues from the IFIMES Institute. Before I finally pass the floor to our guest speaker, I would like to greet our special guest from Iraq, Mr. Lahur Talabani, who is the son of the President of the Republic of Iraq, Ilal Talabani. Welcome to our small but picturesque country. Mr. Minister, we all look forward to listening to your lecture on Slovenian foreign policy and its role in the Western Balkans. The floor is yours. Thank you. Dear guests, allow me to greet you. First of all, can you please ask the speaker to turn on the microphone? Can you turn on the microphone? Thank you. So I look at this award as a confirmation that what we are doing at the Institute is the right thing. Today I have come here to talk about Slovenian foreign policy in the Western Balkans. I am pleased to see such a large number of participants, which means that there is a large interest for this issue in Slovenia. So for the issue of Slovenian policy towards the Western Balkans, this is obviously a topic which we are all interested in and about which we all have a lot to say. Before I continue to the main content, I would like to say the following. Since we are talking about the Western Balkans, I would first of all like to wish to all those who celebrate the Orthodox Christmas today, I wish you all the best for the future year. I have prepared my presentation within a few points which I will present in the context of the development. I will present my view of the situation in the region in view of the enlargement of the Euro-Atlantic integrations. And I will also talk a little bit about the EU political realities which we all have to be aware of, although we may not always agree with it. Due to this, and because we are convinced that Slovenia has a lot to say in this field, it is my duty to present my opinion also abroad, not only in official events, but also at events such as today's informal meeting. That is why I accepted your invitation to attend this lecture, because this gives us an opportunity to extend the discussion on the Western Balkans, also here and in Slovenia. I would like to start with bilateral relations, which are the basis for our activities in the Balkans. Since the beginning of my term of office, I visited all the regions in the Western Balkans. The same goes for the visits of my colleagues from Slovenia. These visits were usually follow-up or they preceded the visit of the Prime Minister or President of the Republic of Slovenia. Usually such meetings are supported by various levels, and we are not talking only about strengthening the bilateral contacts. It is important to preserve those contacts in order to transmit and appropriate messages. It is my pleasure to establish that Slovenia at the moment has excellent relations, partnership relations with all the Western states. I think I'm not exaggerating if I say that these relations are best relations ever we had in Slovenia. They're based on the equal position among the partners, and this is the way to build the future cooperation. Slovenia builds its relations with other countries on a political unbiased position, which also applies to countries which are not on the same position, such as Serbia and Kosovo. We also have a special coordinator, Mr. Vog, and we have prepared last year the Slovenia's position on the Western Balkans, which the government will adopt this month and which will be discussed by the Committee of the Parliament on Foreign Policy. The activities related to the Western Balkans have to become more systematic in order to find mutual benefit for all sides. So we have to ensure the free movement of people, capital, ideas, and so on. This document will present the basis for a strengthened and more harmonized activities of all Slovenian actors in the region. We have defined priorities and measures which are necessary in order to strengthen Slovenia's position in the Western Balkans, both at bilateral and international level. Our aim is to create an environment which will be appropriate to implement Slovenian economic interests as well as to achieve mutual cooperation. Slovenia will preserve its contribution in the region in order to establish the rule of law and security in the region. We will continue to cooperate in the EU military operations in Bosnia and Herzegovina in order to train the Bosnian armed forces. We will continue with cooperation in KFOR in Kosovo and in civil missions in Bosnia and Kosovo, as well as in the security missions in Bosnia and Serbia. Another aim is the promotion of the region through common positions with the ministers on the Western Balkans, as well as various meetings and forums that are hosted by Slovenia, which are important events.
Of course, political support must also be followed by concrete projects of cooperation, transfer experience, strengthening standards, norms, implementing transition, ensuring stability and development in broader sense. That's why Slovenia devotes more than 70% of its developmental resources for development of bilateral cooperation. 8 million euros were devoted in 2007, in 2008 more than 10, and this year we intend to devote more than 13 million euros for this kind of assistance. A lot of such assistance is provided by our public officials within their duties. Of course, these resources devoted for developmental cooperation are limited. We can see some kind of tiredness of some of the most important donor states and supporting countries of the region. Cooperation in the region is at this moment also connected to the financial and economic crisis. That's why we have to find solutions that will ensure the implementation of started projects and also start of new projects. We would like to achieve a better coordination of actors, a better efficiency of assistance, and better synergies between donor countries and recipient countries. This is what we would like to achieve this year with concentrating coordination and development assistance coordination at our ministry. Slovenian institutions and organizations in the countries of Western Balkans are very desired. That's why we have to strengthen our activities in the field of developmental cooperation. We must have a clear vision and strategy in this field. This is how we will deepen our cooperation and expand relations of Slovenia with countries from the Western Balkans. We are very close, geographically close, and we have strong past ties. That's why we are mutually dependent, and this we can use in a positive way for future benefits. At several levels and in several fields, we have different relations that are basis for various ideas and initiatives for developmental cooperation. Often we do not have enough capacities, also not enough financial resources. That's why we devote a lot of attention to so-called tripartite projects. We would like to establish cooperation between the donor and recipient countries. It is important to stress local ownership and a local responsibility for different projects. It is very clear that diplomacy nowadays is an instrument for opening paths of economic interests of countries. The Western Balkans is very important for Slovenia in economic sense. We can witness the increase in exchange and investments. 67% of all Slovenian investments are realized in the countries of the Western Balkans, and we are often present as investors. We have high level of ambitions and expectations in this field, and that's why that also our ministry must be very active in the field of economic diplomacy. We know that we are very much followed or monitored by the broader public. That's why we devote a lot of attention to expanding economic cooperation. And now a few words about Euro-Atlantic enlargement. Integration in this field is an engine of economic development in the Western Balkans region. Unfortunately, the reality is not very much in favor of enlargement and integration. There are many topics that were very important and that are in the strategic interest of the European Union. And I think that Slovenia could play an important role in this field. We must be aware of the political reality, and we must see that the integration into EU or NATO will not just only remain on the paper, but we must do our best to make it reality. The political reality must not be an excuse for the lack of activity. We must expand to the Western Balkans, and this is our obligation. Negative signals in the sense of setting new conditions could be counterproductive and dangerous. And this is also true of the repetition of non-productive discussions without any real progress. Regarding the European Union, this year we will see the 10th anniversary of the Zagreb summit, or of this which was 10 years ago, and today, and the Thessaloniki agenda. Today we have democratic regions, democratic states in the region, and these countries have their own goals. And within this context, we must set a time scale which will be the goal of the countries in this region. We have heard about the year 2014, which could be the appropriate year for including, integrating countries of the Western Balkans into the European Union. Well, our political speaking lost its effect. We must be sober, we must be aware of the reality. And this is an important message conveyed by partners in the conversations that I had in this region. We must fulfill our obligations. We must have concrete and highlighted paths in the direction of becoming members of the EU. And I think that this is the most important task. We must highlight the path into the EU, to the countries of the Western Balkans. I think that this is particularly true of the Bosnia and Herzegovina. The EU must be aware of its responsibility and must not only take this responsibility partially. Bosnia and Herzegovina is lagging behind. It cannot fulfill all the requirements regarding the reforms in order to enter the European Union. Well, we set a goal to close the office of the High Representative and to carry out some constitutional reforms in Bosnia and Herzegovina. However, we were not successful in this field, and many people are of the opinion that we need a break. My colleagues have visited Sarajevo. We listened to Bosnian and Herzegovian politicians. This was a very interesting visit, and we learned a lot out of it. These discussions were very sincere, and they have shown a very real and clear picture. There were some criticisms of the approach of the international community. It is wrong to think that external requirements could work as a kind of a pressure. Solutions cannot be imposed on a country. They could have a negative influence. And we must understand this. However, I'm convinced that we must continue our efforts, and we must be very well prepared. We must consider opinions of our Bosnian and Herzegovinian partners. We must listen to them. This is the basic feature of compromise. Momentarily, we must see that Bosnia and Herzegovina will be able to keep the same pace with other countries of the Western Balkans region. It is important that also the inhabitants of the Bosnia and Herzegovina are aware of the fact that we are not only talking about the lack of success of the international community, but also of the lack of success of Bosnian and Herzegovinian politicians. Inhabitants of Bosnia and Herzegovina would like to be integrated, and they will also have elections in autumn. The European Union is solving many open issues. I can say that Slovenia did a huge and very decisive step in this area, particularly when we're talking about the arbitration agreement with Croatia. Maybe we should also mention the name of another southern neighboring country, Macedonia. If we don't solve this issue, this could negatively influence many other regional issues. Neighboring relations are burdened with many issues that are originating from the past. This year will be very important for the region, also with regard to the expected opinion of the Hague Tribunal regarding the declared independence of Kosovo. Afterwards, it will probably be obvious that Serbia and Kosovo have separate paths to the membership in the EU. And I think that we have to think about a correct and effective treatment regarding the application for membership. The Montenegro and Croatia are already in the process are already being processed regarding their integration into the EU. Serbia will apply this year. Slovenia has done its best to also include Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this goal remains open for the NATO summit in April. The fact is that the EU will not solve its issues by closing itself. It must be open. In this way, it brings additional possibilities for economic enlargement and expansion. However, it is not just the European Union that can bring such decision. All decisions of the European Union so far were positive. All important the strategic importance of the European Union is also reflected in our political and economic reality. It is very important that we do not forget about fulfilling conditions for becoming members in the EU. This is a kind of a maturity exam, and this is a part of the enlargement process. In this way we can also guarantee the success of the further integration. However, we must also ensure progress, because it is important also for the countries in the Western Balkans to become members of the EU.
So what should we do? We should set a clear and credible position on what we expect from those countries and what we are ready to do in order to achieve that. We have to let them know that the reforms are aimed at achieving progress. The changes will not be achieved by the EU. They have to be achieved by the countries themselves, in which the EU can help them. The support to the region without any supporting processes would not be appropriate. And if the countries are not appropriately prepared for joining the EU, they cannot cooperate in it appropriately, and they find themselves in a vicious circle in which the EU and NATO would wait for the countries to adopt the regions, while the countries in the region would wait for the EU and NATO to send them the appropriate signal to enable them to continue with the reforms. In my opinion, this kind of situation would lead to a general tiredness, which would be very harmful. And this is a real possibility, and in order to prevent it, we have to preserve the optimum dynamics of the enlargement and adapt ourselves to the changes in the situation. One of such responses is the visum liberalization, which is a project which enables an abstract organization such as an EU to become more concrete for those new countries. This was a very important step forward in raising awareness of those countries that EU is not just a document that does not work in practice. This is a basis on which the European Union has to build its way forward. I can say that in the visa liberalization process, Slovenia played an important role with the presidency over the European Council. It prepared certain guidelines through which we helped bilateral and professional help to the countries in the region. We were appropriate partner in that process. The visa liberalization for Macedonia, Serbia and Montenegro has become the reality in December, even before the Christmas holidays. And this proves that with persistence and well-founded arguments, political consensus can be achieved. And this also proves that smaller countries in the EU can move forward the processes and not only follow the processes. Also in the West Balkans, it is true that the future lies within the young people, which has been proven by the abolition of the educational fee in the West Balkan countries. And we have to know that the scholarships for the universities are an investment into the future. And the promotion of education among the young people means an important step forward. If this will contribute to the exit from the present crisis for the West Balkans, then perhaps this will not be such a great expense as we might observe it at the moment. Thank you. Thank you very much for this very interesting lecture. Now let's continue with the second part of today's event, which is the discussion with the Minister. Dear Minister, 1 year ago you took over the position of the Minister. What is the situation in the Slovenian foreign policy in terms of the West Balkans, and what is the added value of the politics of your office in comparison with the situation that you met when you took over the position? I took over the position during Slovenia's presidency of the EU into the second half of 2008. So after Slovenia's presidency, and I have to say that during its presidency, Slovenia made a lot of progress in terms of the West Balkans states accessing the EU. Let's remember the Bosnia and Herzegovina accession agreement and the Serbian accession agreement. Unfortunately, there were no greater developments with Macedonia, but fortunately the visa liberalization made a step forward there too. And I think that here I took over the position after the presidency of Slovenia over the EU, when for the first time we were at the same time EU member, NATO member, the presiding state in the EU, and we were able to concentrate on the issue of the West Balkans. And this is what I think we are really doing at the moment. We have done a lot also during the past year, and we went through several phases in the West Balkan regions, from the very first steps when we were still talking about the Garbo complex, when we wanted to take a distance from the West Balkans, until the gradual return to the West Balkans in terms of politics and economy and other fields. And I think that for the first time after presiding the EU, we have an opportunity to form a more complex strategy in terms of the West Balkans, because we have very good relations with all the countries of the West Balkans, and because our economy is very much involved in the economies, in the investments into the West Balkan states. Thirdly, of course, because we are also member of the EU and NATO, and because we are a donor state, and therefore we can concentrate on the West Balkans. So that was our starting point, and our goal is to achieve a coherent approach to the West Balkans and to continue to be their alliance in terms of the EU accession, and to encourage the countries in the region to adopt the reforms in order to move forward to the EU integration. What was missing in the past perhaps was a greater presence of professionals in the international institutions in the West Balkans, and this is what we have laid down in our documents and what the government will deal with already this month. We already have some Slovenian diplomats who are present in the Sarajevo representation, and a diplomat with the European Commission representation in Skopje, and I think we have to continue from this position, also because of our knowledge of the region and our interest in the region. I think it would be good to have some more professionals within the EU institutions and in the field. And this is what we will dedicate special attention to also in the future. The next topic is the establishment of partnership relations with the countries. As I said, we have very good relations with those countries, but there are also some open issues which relate to the past and which we are trying to resolve now. I can say that with each country separately, we are trying to build good relations and to find some common projects, also political projects, on which we build our mutual interests and on which, or through which, we try to achieve or establish even better relations with those states. I mentioned the young generation. I think an important step forward was to abrogate the scholarship fees for the students from the West Balkans in Slovenian universities. And this year the ministry allocated a certain number of grants for the students from Kosovo. I think that in the process of integration of those countries in the EU, Slovenia will be able to assist them a lot with the presentation of documents, with the presentation of the reforms and all those structural preparations in order to move forward in the process at a faster rate. So I think that Bosnia and Herzegovina is the only country which has not submitted the application for membership yet, but I hope this moment is soon to come. I think we have a lot more opportunities to do a lot more in this field, and that's why we have allocated more funds for this year, for this field in this year in comparison with last year, in order to implement all those projects. So these are a few things I wanted to mention in order to present how we continue the politics that has already been established, but we are also trying to promote it at a faster rate. You mentioned the staff deficit, which is always present in any organization that is trying to do things at a faster rate. Do you think that you could resolve the issue of staff deficit during your term of office? We don't have really the staff deficit in our ministry. There are a lot of competent diplomats, both younger and older, and I think we have built a very high quality diplomatic service, and this enables us greater flexibility of our ministry in allocating people or sending them abroad, and this will make it easier to adopt decisions for us, especially, or an special importance in this foreign policy is attributed to the economic policy, in which field we had an economic meeting recently. So this is my reply to your question, and I think that the people employed with the ministry are competent and trained well to carry out all the functions in the field of foreign policy. And what you related to were the 30% that are present as the possibility for employing new people for the highest position in foreign policy positions, which is the possibility so that the ministry to appoint people who are not employed with the ministry to foreign positions.
In December last year, we hosted Mr. Žigaturk within the group of the wise men. They were talking about Europe in the period 2020-2030. Well, you are a marathon runner. Are you running this kind of long distances? Did you help to gather resources for this organization? More than $100,000. How do you see Slovenia in international relations in 2 or 3 decades? Well, this is a big, huge question. We are drafting a strategy of Slovenian foreign policy for the period 2010-2015. In January, we will publish it, but we do not go that far into future as the mentioned group. How do I see the Slovenian foreign policy in 2020 and further on? Well, I think that now I will be talking about my wishes now. Maybe you will be invited to this institute then. Yes, wishful thinking. Well, how will Slovenia and its foreign policy look like in 2020? Slovenia is a small country, can play even a more important role in foreign policy as an agent, as a transfer of messages, as an arbiter in finding compromises. In November, as I have mentioned, I visited Sarajevo after 2 Budimir processes. In discussions that I held with the leading personalities in Sarajevo, I established that one can find out a lot only by listening and by hearing. People, when see that you are interested in issues, that you want to hear their opinion, tell you a lot. And I think this could be an important task of Slovenia, to listen and to convey messages, and through this to try to find solutions, to warn about wrong approaches of the international community. For example, when managing the Budimir process, I think that Slovenia in the future could develop its brokering role, so to say, and this could be broader, not covering just the area of the Western Balkans. It could also cover countries in which that have no particular interest in the international community, maybe countries that only wish peace, countries that do not have any special egotistic interests. I think that such countries could have this role of conveyors, of messengers, of agents. I think that we can play an important role in humanitarian issues. For example, the ITF project, the demining process. I saw Director Gachning here in the audience. Or maybe let me mention the project of Palestinian children that were brought from Gaza twice already, and that is still going on. So I'm talking about small project that could grow big. This project of Palestinian children in Gaza has developed. Or maybe a project of learning about human rights. This is what we did when presiding the OECD and also when presiding the Council of Europe. We included a lot of children, more than 10,000 of them, in the program of learning about human rights of children. I think that this could also be an area where Slovenia could develop its speciality. So this is where I see Slovenia in the future. And foreign policy will probably also play an important role for Slovenian economy. We will see what the difference will be in demands, in requirements of the public regarding diplomacy and its assistance to the economy. I think that this issue will grow. And there are some new issues such as climate change. Here also small countries could play important roles. This is where I see the role of Slovenia in the future. Well, you used the word brokering. The Slovenia could be a kind of a broker regarding international issues. And you have several times mentioned Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Mesic says if Bosnia is peaceful, then the region is peaceful. However, in the Western Balkans, some processes were very slowed down or were eliminated. This is a kind of a paradigm that did not come to real existence. I think that the situation here is difficult. Some European actors support policies that are directly connected to criminal. Let me mention Mr. Milorad Dodik, Premier of the Republika Srpska. And this is also related to some representatives of the international community. So how can you, as a Slovenian foreign minister, coordinate the role of the European Union and of the USA regarding the solving issues in the Western Balkans? As we have said, the Budimir process was not successful. So how to get along with such partners as some politicians in Bosnia and neighboring states? When we were talking about visa liberalization at our institute, we have mentioned several times that this is a great achievement. However, we should introduce visas for some politicians to enter the European Union because of their negative contribution. So, how do you see this contribution of the EU and of the US in this field? They often also turn to us about our opinion about the situation in the Western Balkans. Well, look, all countries of the Western Balkans are democratic countries. They have their legitimately elected leaders. Every few years, they have elections and people express their opinions on at such elections. They support their own leaders. In this way, these leaders are legitimate leaders. In September or October, we will see elections in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it will be clear to whom the inhabitants of Bosnia and Herzegovina will extend their support. So we have processes that are in force, and we must accept that fact. Well, Slovenia, as a EU member state, expresses its considerations when thinking that processes are not conducted correctly. So Slovenia openly speaks about that. In the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina and its NATO membership, or regarding the action plan for membership, at the discussion of foreign ministers at the beginning of December, was very exposed. Slovenia was the most exposed country, together with Turkey, insisting that Bosnia and Herzegovina really needs this action plan for membership, and that it would be correct to ensure this action plan to it. However, we were not very successful, and I hope that Bosnia will be successful before April, so that it could become a member. So what is the role of Slovenia? Slovenia expresses its opinion, its understanding, its assessment of the situation in the region. It conveys initiatives within the EU, and it also strengthens the activity of the EU by doing this. I have mentioned the example of visa liberalization. In that case, we have seen that also small countries, when active, can move things forward. Within the European Union, it often seems that we are more or less talking about the integration of bigger countries. However, I think that there are some examples when initiatives can be given also by smaller countries in a very successful manner. And I think this is the way of thinking that we should follow. It is not our task only to explain the situation and to draw attention to some mistakes. We must also take initiatives and propose solutions. Regarding the Budimir process and constitutional changes in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I must say that this is a process that must be conducted by the politicians of Bosnia and Herzegovina themselves. The international community, of course, must help, but cannot impose solutions. All countries that are relevant must be included in the process, which means also the Russian Federation and Turkey. And these are the countries that help the process. However, the solutions must be found by the Bosnian politicians themselves. Otherwise, they will not last. They will not get a consent.
Although I think that in the West Balkans, in certain countries, there is a phenomenon of criminalization of politics and corruption in politics. In such context, we cannot expect the politicians to undertake court proceedings against themselves. That is why I think it's important to ensure the assistance from the courts and politicians from other countries so that these political criminal elites from the former system would be removed. Here I think we should stress the role of the International Criminal Tribunal, which have processed several crimes and genocides and so on. The European Parliament last year adopted a decision that after the closing down of the Hague Tribunal, they would finance the court proceedings that have to be concluded in Bosnia and Herzegovina, also for two war criminals, Ratko Mladic and Hadžić, excuse me. Is there morality in foreign relations? Because the profession of a politician is not very much esteemed, not only in Slovenia, but also in some other countries of the EU, as has been shown by the public opinion polls. How should the politics be made closer to the people so that they would be willing to participate in various social activities and events? Because also in the EU we have a phenomenon where the elites work for their own purposes, and when we go out of the European Union, we feel this identity when we meet somebody from the EU, and only then it is when we identify ourselves as the Europeans. How do you regard these international relations as a politician? Because the ordinary people see a lot of injustice and a lot of things that are not to be accepted as humane and moral acts. So there should be a minimum of political morality which the people expect from the activities such as the politics. that is why we have the international law, and that is why we have the international courts, international tribunals and conventions and international agreements and so on. And that is why we have the United Nations organizations and the Convention on Human Rights in the European Union. I think that it is in the interest of small states especially to strengthen these international law and international institutions which guarantee the better order and justice in these international issues and international relations. And I think this is the recipe. So we have to strengthen the international order, the international instruments in this field. Concerning the European identity, I think that a huge step forward has already been done, because the European Union has transformed from an economic union to the political union, and it has become more active in international relations when it assumes the responsibility for certain operations in Bosnia, for example, or in Kosovo. It is present in the Middle East, it is present in Afghanistan. I think about 20 operations so far have been carried out abroad by the European Union, and this is how we strengthen also the identity of the European Union abroad, as well as the identity within the EU. I think that the competition of the international community will also strengthen our identity. We are talking about G2, about America and China as two superpowers. And at this moment we are not talking about the future. In the future we are talking about G1. So I think this will force Europe and the Europeans to think about their identity and also to promote certain processes within the EU. For me, it was very sad to see the pictures on the first pages of newspaper entitled "The Day After Copenhagen," where they show the picture showing presidents of America, India, South Africa, China and Brazil sitting at the same table, while there was nobody from the EU present there. And that picture seemed as a new directive of the international community in which the EU is missing, from whatever reason that was. Because the EU was, in the field of climate change, the leading country for the processes, and I think that we should hear a bell ringing here and take more seriously this common foreign policy and this office of the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. I think that Ms. Ashton has a lot of responsibility in this field, and hopefully she will make good progress in the future. I think that this competition in the international community will probably improve the strengthening of the identity of EU. Before I pass the floor to my colleague, Bakhtiar Aliyev, I would like to ask another question. If the civil society sets such questions, this does not mean that we are EU skeptics. It only means that we have to point to certain problems, because we think that if there is a problem and if we are looking for the solution, then we will find a solution. But if we do not point to those problems, we cannot expect any solutions to be found. Now I pass the floor to my colleague Bakhtiar Aliyev. The first question, Mr. Jelko Kacin, member of the European Parliament. Mr. Minister, first I would like to congratulate you for devoting so much time to Bosnia and Herzegovina, because this is obviously the country that is not only a geographical center but also the political epicenter that will influence a lot the dynamics of the positive processes in the West Balkans. That is why I would, since you have been the ambassador to the United States, and since this year we'll have the 15th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide and an anniversary of the Dayton Agreement, and the 15 years have passed since Bosnia and Herzegovina has been imposed upon the peace. So, Mr. Minister, the peace was imposed on Bosnia and Herzegovina, the peace was imposed on Kosovo, and the further fragmentation of Bosnia and Herzegovina will not enable your dreams to be realized by 2014. So I suggest you use your connections in the United States and influence the administration to finally appoint the High Representative for the West Balkans, which Bosnia and Herzegovina desperately needs, and which also Kosovo and Albania need, as well as all other Western Balkan countries and candidate countries need. So it is urgent to appoint the High Representative for the Balkans. Secondly, you said that the High Representative office in Sarajevo should be abolished. I do not agree with that, and I have a completely opposing position. I think that we have to preserve that office and even strengthen it, because the history has taught us that Germany, when it was the protectorate of 4 forces, and in its constitution it wrote that it has to be an international protectorate until the demolishment of until the fall of the Berlin Wall. So if that is not realized, then we will have to wait for the international High Representative for the West Balkans, but that will probably not be realized. Mr. Minister, that is why I think it would not be appropriate to mention any year. In all the reports we try to avoid mentioning any years. Any mentioning of years actually means a bad basis for any country. So it is my sincere recommendation for you, when you're preparing our guidelines for the policy for those countries, not to mention the years. Now, finally, my question, since we have a high guest from Iraq, what do you think about the idea to start to form a cluster of Slovenian constructing and other East European constructing companies that would go together to Iraq, so that also those West Balkan states would get some well-paid jobs that are important for better economic security and better connections of those countries in order to enter the third market. I think that would be a good opportunity, since 2 or 3 days ago you were talking about diplomatic initiative. I think this would be a good idea that would be well accepted also in the West Balkans. Thank you.
Well, let me answer the question. I will also comment your question, not just answer it. Well, the High Representative of the UN for the Western Balkans, well, this could be realized. However, I'm more concerned about the policy of the European Union regarding the Western Balkans. the EU does not have somebody who would have a global look at the Western Balkans. I also think that the Western Balkans should fall within the responsibility of the European Union. I know that we will not get the solution from the US. That's why I understand that you see this necessity of a high representative to solve issues in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well as in Kosovo. Maybe this would be good, yes. But more than that, I am concerned, or I think that the EU should have its own way of thinking, its own rationale regarding the countries in the Western Balkans. And we should have a high representative, or our high representative for foreign affairs should bear that in mind in the future. I was talking about the Butmir process, which tried to find solutions to abolish the office of the High Representative, or its transition to the office of a European representative, and which should also introduce some constitutional reforms. Well, I think that the office of the High Representative is very much connected with the constitutional changes in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Regarding the year 2014 that I have mentioned, well, I was not the first one to mention it. I just mentioned that some countries, concretely Greece, talk about 2014 as a year that could be the target year for integrating all countries into the European Union. I just said that I think that this is not impossible. Well, regarding our strategy, it includes no years, so don't worry about that. However, I think that it is important to give positive signals to countries in the region. I think that this is what is lacking on the side of the European Union. The visa liberalization for the mentioned three countries was a positive sign, and I think that we should have more such signals, that they are desired. And I think that there is not enough of them. Well, of course, mentioning years, this is always a tricky issue, a dangerous one. Particularly when we're not able to fulfill the promises. However, mentioning years could also stimulate countries in the region to promote, to facilitate their reforms. From the side of the European Union, this could be seen as a real commitment to enlargement. Well, regarding the cooperation with the countries of the Western Balkans, with the third countries, including Iraq, I can say that I agree with your proposal. We have already discussed such things when visiting third countries. For example, Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, regarding the entering third markets, so that I can say that this is something that we should be working on, something that we should devote more attention in the future. Slovenia is obviously more and more directed also to the Arab world. Our Prime Minister has visited some Arab countries, and we think that it is necessary to establish relations. So far, we did not have the real relations established, so we have to establish communication first. We have to start exchanging visits that could lead to a closer economic cooperation. This is what we work at our ministry. And then now a question by Mr. Bunic. Mr. Minister, as a member of IFIMES, I would like to congratulate you for the award given by the Institute. You're the right person to receive it. I would like to thank you for a very interesting lecture. My question would be, you have described very well the functioning of Slovenia and of Slovenian foreign policy in the Western Balkans. However, in the region of Western Balkans, we also have some other active countries from the European Union and also outside the European Union. Is Slovenia coordinating its activities in the Western Balkans regions with some important countries that are also active in the region? Thank you. Mr. Petric, we will take another question. Thank you. Mr. Minister, I don't have any direct questions. However, I would like to support your lecture today. You used the word acceleration of our active policy in the Balkans. You have probably already heard me saying that the Balkans is the region that is given by the God to Slovenia. Well, we cannot play a great role in the Baltic region or at the Black Sea. However, in the Balkan region, we can play a very important role. What is going on in the Balkans is related also to our situation, and welfare and peace is also in our national interest. The Balkans should be stable. This is also good for Slovenia. I would like to mention another thing and draw your attention to it by saying that the Balkans is the region where Slovenia can be profiled. The international community is very much interested in the opinion of Slovenia regarding the Balkans region or Kosovo or Bosnia. Well, if we are present in the region, that we confirm Slovenia as a country that is playing an important role in the region. That's why I wanted to reiterate that I strongly support this orientation into the Balkan region. And also Mr. Kacin said the same. Of course, in the European Parliament, our MEPs are often called as rapporteurs about the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina or Montenegro or Kosovo. To be short, Balkans is the priority number one of the Slovenian foreign policy. In the past, you can remember, until 1997 or 2000, our active role was understood as a kind of a comeback to the Yugoslavian framework. But this was a wrong perception. I think that Slovenian foreign policy should play an important role further on. And another thing, I do not agree with foreign policy that did not start with your taking over the office. It started during the presidency of Slovenia. And in that period, we were mostly listening. I think that this is not the right approach, not just listening. We must have our own strategy. We must have our own strength, our own style. We are the only country from the Balkans region that is a member of the EU and of NATO. So we should not only be listening and conveying messages. We should also bear concepts. We should convey ideas and we should try to implement them also in the broader sense by using our knowledge, of course. I think that we're capable of doing this. It is a kind of a dissonance with the period of our presidency over the EU. In that period, we were mostly listening, asking questions. We did not openly say Slovenia sees these things in this way. So I would like to ask you about your opinion in this field.
So, the first question, coordination with other countries in the West Balkans. Yes, we do a lot of coordinating. We coordinate, or actually we talk with other countries in the West Balkans, and that's all the countries that are the actors in the West Balkans. Is of course with the EU member countries as well as with Russia and Turkey. And I think at this level we have a regular dialogue on this topic from the highest ministerial level to the expert levels through our embassies. And I agree with Ambassador Petric that Balkans is the only field where we can have an important international role, because it is the area where we are an important economic power. And there is no doubt about that. It is true that the people in the EU are interested in what we think about the Balkans, although we do have also certain opinions about the Palestine question and so on, but those questions are not so much interesting for the EU to hear from us about. So you mentioned an interesting thing that does represent a certain problem. I think that from the period of accession to the EU, we are used to agreeing with the positions of the EU, and here we need, or we are in a process of a leap or in a switch of thinking. And I still see a lot of material where we say we support the position of the EU. So when they ask us about our position, we don't have any position because we haven't formed it. So this is a process in which we are at the present. So we actually have to be aware that we are able to form the opinion ourselves. As I have already mentioned, the meeting of NATO foreign minister in December, where we persisted on our positions. Of course, it was easier because we were not alone. There was also a minister from Turkey with us, but still, this was such an example where we assumed our position. And in general, I can say that I agree with you, so we are not here only to convey messages. By conveying or transferring messages, I had in mind the conveying of messages from the region to the EU, because we usually are the ones who understand the messages differently than people from other EU countries. This is my experience, and this is what I meant by saying conveying the message. But I agree with you that perhaps we should be more active in forming our positions within the organizations that we are members of. Far too often we are in the phase of explaining the situation, of explaining and interpreting the problems, but not enough in offering the solutions. So we don't ask ourselves what is the problem, but only what is the problem. We also have to ask ourselves how to find a solution. The document that we prepared in the foreign ministry and that the government will deal with next week, I hope that it will help to accelerate this process of thinking, of the change in thinking, and I hope that this document and that our orientation should be reflected in an increased activities of Slovenian foreign policy towards the West Balkans. Several ministers will visit Slovenia in the first half of the year, and especially as regards Bosnia, we see the ministerial meeting as an opportunity to help Bosnia and Herzegovina to go through certain reforms that will make it easier for the country to go through the process. And visa liberalization is something that we have set ourselves as a goal to be achieved within the EU. So the liberalization of visas for Bosnia is something we want to achieve already during the Spanish presidency. In December, Macedonia received from the Commission the approval of the date for the commencement of negotiations, but the decision postponed this decision for half a year, and I think this will be an important half of the year. And in June, a decision will have to be reached. And here we have to see how we can play an active role in order to achieve this goal. Serbia has already filed an application which will probably be processed during the Spanish presidency, and it is in our interest for Serbia to proceed with those integrations as soon as possible. And then we come back to Bosnia once again. Bosnia also has to follow this, so it should not lag behind this train which has already left the station. So we doubt that it will be possible to adopt the constitutional reforms in Bosnia in the next few months. The elections are very close, so in October they may be anticipated, and perhaps here I agree with a member of the European Parliament, Mr. Kasin, that we should not set any certain date here. The action plan for membership is not related to constitutional amendments, nor is the visa liberalization related to those amendments. So, regarding the accession to the EU, there are still some reforms that have to be carried out in order to adapt the country to be able to become member of the EU. But that is still far away in the future. So I hope that our document and our decisiveness to pay attention to these questions this year will reflect in a more active role of Slovenia, especially with finding the initiatives and for the solutions that we think are good. We are preparing a paper on Bosnia and Herzegovina that should be presented to the international community in the future, and this is one of the ways how we can support the processes. Next question. Thank you. My name is Blaž Gorob from the Regional Development Institution for the Western Europe. I would like to congratulate you for the achievements in the past year, and I have a question related to regional cooperation and institutional mechanisms. You mentioned the Zagreb process. Where an institution was formed which unites these initiatives that go beyond the individual problems and could contribute to some development in the region as a whole. So I want to know how you see the role of this institution as a moderator or as one of the moderators for the accession of the countries in the region to the EU, as well as an opportunity for the companies in terms of larger cross-border projects that are not related only to one country but to several countries, such as railway connections from Ljubljana to Istanbul. Thank you. I will be very short because I don't really have a long answer to that. ICC is an important international organization with the head office in Sarajevo, and I think it's very important, as well as a central regional organization, because it connects the countries on concrete projects. As you said, projects of cross-border importance, such as transport infrastructures and so on. And also in the future, I think that this will remain an important organization because it unites all the countries in the region and because it has regional or local ownership, as we can say, although it is under the auspices of the EU, but it is still managed by the countries themselves. So the organization encourages cooperation and finding resolutions to concrete projects through mutual cooperation. And I think this is a very important instrument for regional cooperation and activities in the region. Regarding Slovenia's participation in RCC and the role of the economy in this relation, I cannot really say how I see our role in RCC, although RCC does form various roles, or it helps conclude certain agreements on certain topics, such as the energy corridor and so on. And here Slovenian companies can probably participate in such large projects, such as transport connections and cross-border cooperation. So economic operators or companies can always participate here, but I cannot really tell you concretely how that can be done. Perhaps some people from my ministry could answer that question in more detail. And the last question, if there is any, the ambassador from Albania.
Vaša ekscelenca, minister, zahvaljujem se vam za dobro predstavitev prioritet Slovenije na Zahodnem Balkanu in njene zunanje politike v regiji. Kot vemo, Slovenija igra pomembno vlogo in jo je igrali tudi na področju liberalizacije vizumov za državljane Zahodnega Balkana, tako da zdaj lahko potujejo v Evropsko unijo. Albanija in Bosna Hercegovina žal še nista uspeli biti članici prve skupine držav, kjer so uvedli liberalizacijo vizumov. Smo si pa zadali, da čim prej izpolnimo sklope zahtevkov za liberalizacijo vizumov. V zadnji četrtini zadnjega leta smo bili zelo dejavni, tako v parlamentu, kot tudi na vladi, da bi lahko izpolnili ta pogoj. Parlament se je nedavno odločil, da bo sprejel novi zakon za boj proti mafiji. In postavili naj bi tudi moratorij proti nezakonitemu trgovanju na Sredozemskem morju. Hkrati želimo uveljaviti tudi poenoten informacijski sistem na vseh 26 mejnih kontrolnih točkah. Moram reči, da smo dokaj hitri pri naših spremembah, precej hitrejši, kot je bilo predvideno na začetku. Tako da bi vas želel vprašati naslednje. Ali bi lahko prišlo do odločitve o liberalizaciji vizumov hitreje, kot je bilo v zadnjem primeru? Recimo najprej za Albanijo, pa potem za Bosno, pa še za Kosovo. Ja, we will of course do our best in this direction. But this does not only depend on Slovenia, it predominantly depends on the fulfillment of our conditions by Albania and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And that will be examined by commissions, working groups, experts of the EU who will have to submit a report. And I must say that we will do our best to be as fast as possible and to carry this out during the Spanish presidency. I think that it is very important that this gap, the time gap between the visa liberalization for the first set of countries and visa liberalization for the second set of countries is not too big. So I hope that you will follow as soon as possible. We will do our best to reach this decision in the first half of this year. Of course, after we receive positive recommendations from working groups of the Commission. Of course, this is a decision that must be adopted by the entire European Union. And now the last question. Anybody? If there are no questions, let us conclude. Well, we had a very positive climate here. We would like to invite our minister to come next year to this institute to have a lecture. And what do you say? Well, thank you. I'm prepared to come. Thank you. And we can make a review what has been done within a year after good predictions at this moment. Mr. Minister, I would like to thank you on behalf of our institute for coming here. We were glad to see you and we are expecting to see you here next year. I hope that you will spread positivism further on. I wish you a very successful new year. I would also like to thank all participants that came to this event. Now you are invited to continue visiting our cycle of conversations with very interesting partners also this month. However, now I would like to invite you to some refreshments and also to some further events in 2010. Thank you very much. Yeah.